Hi friends! Today we're continuing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We're on chapter 4, The Secret Workers. The next evening, Grandpa Joe went on with his story. You see, Charlie, not so very long ago there used to be thousands of people working in Mr. Wonka's factory. Then one day, all of a sudden, Mr. Wonka had to ask every single one of them to leave and to go home and never come back. But why? Asked Charlie. Because of spies. Spies? Yes, all the other chocolate makers you see had begun to grow jealous of the wonderful candies that Mr. Wonka was making, and they started sending in spies to steal his secret recipes. The spies took jobs in Wonka's factory, pretending to be ordinary workers, and while they were there, each one of them found out exactly how a certain special thing was made. And how did they go back to their own factories and tell? Asked Charlie. Well, they must have, asked Grandpa Joe, because soon after that, Fickle Grubber's factory started making an ice cream that would never melt, even on the hottest sun. And then Prodnose's factory came out with a chewing gum that never lost its flavor no matter how much you chewed it, and then Slugworth's factory began making candy balloons that you could blow up in huge sizes before you popped them with a pen and gobbled them up, and so on and so on. And Mr. Wonka tore his beard and shouted, "This is terrible, I shall be ruined! There are spies everywhere! I shall close the factory!" But he didn't do that, Charlie said. Oh, yes, he did. He told all his workers that he was sorry, but they had to go home. Then he shut the main gates and fastened them with a chain. And then suddenly Wonka's giant factory became silent and deserted. The chimneys stopped smoking and the machines stopped whirling. And from then on, not a single chocolate or candy was made. Not a soul went in or out. Even Mr. Wonka himself disappeared completely. Months and months went by. Grandpa Joe went on, and still the factory remained closed. And everybody said, "Poor Mr. Wonka, he was so nice, and he made such marvelous things, and now he's finished, it's all over." Then something astonishing happened. One day, early in the morning, thin columns of white smoke were seen to be coming out of the top of the tall chimneys of the factory. People in the town stopped and stared. "What's going on?" they cried. "Someone's lit the furnaces. Mr. Wonka must be opening up again." They ran to the gates, expecting to see them wide open, and Mr. Wonka standing there to welcome back his workers. But no, the great iron gates were still locked and chained so securely as ever, and Mr. Wonka was nowhere to be seen. "But the factory is working," the people shouted. "Listen, you can hear the machines. They're all whirling again, and you can smell the smell of chocolate melting in the air." Grandpa Joe leaned forward and laid a long, bony finger on Charlie's knee, and he said, "But most mysterious of all, Charlie, was the shadows in the windows of the factory. The people standing on the street outside could see the dark shadows moving about behind the frosted glass windows." "Shadows of whom?" said Charlie quickly. "That's exactly what everybody else wanted to know. The place is full of workers," the people shouted, "but nobody's gone in. The gates are locked. It's crazy, and nobody's come out either." "But there was no question at all," said Grandpa Joe, "that the factory was running, and it's gone on running ever since for the last 10 years. What's more, the chocolates and candies it's been turning out have become more fantastic and delicious all the time. And of course now, when Mr. Wonka invents some new and wonderful candy, neither Mr. Fickle Grubber or Podnose or Slugworth nor anybody else is able to copy it. No spies go into the factory to find out how it's made." "But Grandpa, who," said Charlie, "who is Mr. Wonka using to do all the work in the factory?" "Nobody knows, Charlie." "But that's absurd. Hasn't somebody asked Mr. Wonka?" "Nobody's seen him anymore. He never comes out. The only thing that he comes out of that place are chocolates and candies. They come out through the special trapdoor in the wall, all packed and addressed, and they are picked up every day by post office trucks." "But Grandpa, what sort of people are there that work in there?" "My dear boy," said Grandpa Joe, "that's the one great mystery of the chocolate-making world. We know only one thing about them. They are very small. Their faint shadows sometimes appear behind the windows, especially late at night when the lights are on. Are those of tiny little people no taller than my knee." "There aren't any such people," Charlie said. Just then Mr. Bucket, Charlie's father, came into the room. He was home from the toothpaste factory, and he was waving an evening paper rather excitingly in the air. "Have you guys heard the news?" he cried. He held up the paper so that they could see the huge headline. The headline said, "Wonka Factory to be opened at last to a lucky few." Now, my friends, this is chapter 4. See you soon.